Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Iresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutaya Pramanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings and the world, living in constant recognition of this fact, is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Hiranmai Parikoshi Virajan Brahmanishkalam Tachu Brahm Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vidho Vidduhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, free of any taint, the essence of everything which all beings seek, either knowingly or unknowingly, there shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. It is that auspicious time when we meet for teachings in SRV Loka. Loka means a atmosphere or a place or a time. And we study the Dharma when we meet like that. It's very beneficial, and of course it's a good thing for all of us that for 20 years now SRV has been giving out these teachings, which we received from the Swamis of India mostly, and of course our own readings early on of the scriptures of India, but it all has to do with Mother India. And it's called sometimes, and by some people, Sanatana Dharma. The best connotation for that expression is eternal path, eternal religion. And of course Indian philosophy is mixed in with religion. They check each other, like the two wings of a bird. We were saying, religion alone can sometimes go the sentimental route, and wisdom alone can sometimes get a little sterile, maybe even be subject to fundamentalism after the rolling on of ages and yugas and so forth, and even centuries, as we know by religions such as Buddhism and Christianity and Hinduism, that they had peaks and declines. And this Sanatana Dharma, or maybe a better expression for it nowadays that Vivekananda brought to the West, would be called Advaita Vedanta. And that is the non-dual strand that runs through and coalesces and and keeps together all the different darshanas. Not only just the darshanas like worshippers of Shiva, worshippers of Vishnu, worshippers of Divine Mother, and worshippers of Ganesha, and the Sankhya yogis and Buddhists and so forth, because they're all aware of that non-dual tenet, and they all espouse it in their religious preferences and approaches. But also all the religions of the world, I think, are woven together by that non-dual strand. You can see, although India did concentrate on non-duality from the get-go, those two great pillars being, number one, the soul is birthless, deathless, eternal, without beginning and end, and so beyond time and all of that. So that means Ajativada, as Krishna would teach it in the Gita. Ajati, no birth for the soul. So that's one of the great things we ponder to help us remember here in what they call relativity, or what we call Maya, or samsara, if we're not in knowledge of this non-dual premise that's there. We contemplate that to keep ourselves in remembrance. As I just chanted, Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukta Esha, it's all Brahman, Vedanta declares. And if you live in constant recognition of that fact, then that's called enlightenment. But if you forget it, then you might as well be lost completely. And we see lost souls all around us all the time. Some are even pretending to be found, but they're lost. They come up against some sort of challenge or tribulation, or even a trial or a victory even, and it sends them off into some tangent with the ego. So these Vedantic gut checks are necessary, these classes that we undertake. One of the Swamis call these teachings Vedantic thought bombs. That used to be one of the titles of the articles, or little particles of articles that you see in Vedanta Keshari and Prabhupada Bharata and magazines like that these Indian Swamis, of the Ramakrishna order in particular, have been putting out for decades. Then the other axiom that I'm talking about, the two axioms, is this non-transformation. It's a real good gut check for spiritual seekers. A parinama, it's called. It means anytime you see transformation going on, no matter what it is. It doesn't need to be just chemical transformations when you're in a lab, or any transformation going on in the body, like growth and so forth. Transformations in the mind, visions you see, growth you think you're making, and so forth. Anytime you see any kind of transformation going on, then you know Maya is in operation. Brahman only comes forth in the changeless atmosphere. It epitomizes the changelessness of things, beyond all things, rather. And so everything that goes through change and transformation, that's one of the axioms of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. Then you know you're suspect. It's suspect. So you suspect it. And you back off from it and detach from it right away. It changes. So it's the same with your children. If they're growing up, you don't teach them that you're growing. You teach them that the Atman is birthless and deathless and changeless. That's what you teach them, because that's going to stand them in good stead when the final transformation called death comes. And you have to prepare them for that. As a parent, that's your responsibility, to prepare them for the harsh realities of relativity. And if you don't, and your culture doesn't, like American culture, no teachings anywhere in education about spiritual things. And so we're up a creek without a paddle, you see, when it comes to hard times. We haven't learned the art of renunciation. We don't know detachment very well. And we run away and shy away from death. Father of Yoga says that fear of death is the fifth and lowest of all hells that you can be in, fear of death, because back to the axioms, what's that one I said? You're birthless and deathless. If you accept that, not just as a premise, but as an axiom, then if you fear death, and they say it's rather like a snake living in fear of a frog, when it should be having it for dinner. So in other words, you're the condiment for death, instead of death being a condiment for you. You see, death is a transition, isn't it? It's a transformation. So it must be in Maya, if you follow the axioms. See, it's a change. So it must not be real, absolutely real. Anything that changes, absolutely, I don't accept it. I only accept the birthless, deathless, changeless Atman as reality. That one who has known the Atman as the only reality, what can thwart them? What can make them fear? What can make them doubt? For what do you seek for everywhere around the world if you've known the birthless, deathless Atman? To be in you, to be stationary, to be changeless, to be motionless. Then if you've known that, then you've recognized the nature of reality, which is changeless and birthless and deathless. So these are the things that underline Sanatana Dharma in its highest definition, and epitomized so well, as the chant said, by the Upanishads, which we're studying today and yesterday here in San Francisco. Welcome to the live streaming audience, those of you who are watching from different points. Yesterday, as you remember, we went through pretty much in depth the slokas 17, 18, and 19 of chapter 4. San Francisco is still trying to finish up the Svetashvatara Upanishad. Portland Sangha has gone on to the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is waiting for you when we finish this. In other words, this is just an ongoing, call it an exercise if you want, for Westerners. It's a way of engaging in scriptures that come from another culture and from another time, thousands and thousands of years before Christ. So you are very impressed then when you read them, and you begin to think that maybe the passage of time doesn't necessarily bring us wisdom. Maybe it brings us ignorance. See, maybe wisdom gets covered by the passage of time. If we look further enough back, 5,000 years BC, to the Taittiriya Upanishad and the Svetashvatara Upanishads, and then we find out that they were much more wise than the disciples of Jesus, who were just fishermen. They were talking about these non-dual principles and keeping those first and foremost in their mind, and that was an ancient civilization. See, I don't even like to use the expression cradle of civilization, because cradle makes it sound like an infant. But they don't call these scriptures old or young. They call them timeless, because that's in accord with the two axioms, right? It's birthless, it's deathless, it's timeless. It's spaceless too. And now, are we so wise when we're so preoccupied with physical space, with matter? Does that make us wise? Are scientists wise? They knew that there were 4 other kinds of space within them, and they meditated on these kinds of space. The space of prana. Do you don't think Christ knew about that? He said, man does not live by bread alone. So you don't live here in the physical world only. You live in your dreams. You live in deep sleep, beyond form, and you live in Brahman. Actually, that's the only place you really live. It's called eternal life. And Christ knew about that too. And he wanted to make the people of the day fishers of men, so they would come, and he was a rabbi. He was a teacher in Judaism. Christianity hadn't been born yet, see. But Vedas were thousands of years old still, and timeless. It's very possible and probable, really, that Christ drew from his teachings, and other great souls drew from these teachings, which had established themselves on those pillars. And those pillars weren't driven into the bedrock of the human mind at any point in time. We came upon them and discovered them as human beings. They're a part of Ishvara, they're a part of the firstborn soul. And that's what the slokas are telling us here. And in fact, the ones we're coming up to are very explicit about it. We took some of them yesterday. So with that, again, as an introduction to introduce us or to ease us in, hopefully, to the Vedantic atmosphere, which is basically non-dual, we find that there are expressions in the Upanishads and these slokas we're studying that also smack of the qualified non-dual, they call it. There's non-duality and there's duality. Duality is, I and my Father are two. See, God is in heaven, I'm here. No, never the twain shall meet. There's a relationship, which is good, and that's good for the dualist, you see. Vivekananda used to say that. He used to say, this idea that God is separate from mankind is true if you're a dualist. But if you're a non-dualist, it's bondage. It gets in the way of I and my Father are one, or be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is. So if you have graduated from duality to non-duality, you must have gone through this stage called qualified non-duality. Vivekananda used Christ's teachings when he said, the qualified non-dual is I'm the vine and you're the branches. See, the dualist is, pray to your Father in heaven. The two, you see. There's a line of demarcation between man and God. Advaita doesn't accept that. Many of the teachings of Judaism and Islam don't accept that. See, that's what I'm saying. A lot of non-dual atmosphere and truth understated in these religions of the world, but they're underscored in Vedanta. See? Difference understated, underscored. They're brought out in Vedanta. That's Advaita Vedanta, you see. And Swami Vivekananda has brought that to us in America and in Europe, in England and so forth, in 1893 and again in early 1900s. He came here twice. And then he brought his brother monks over. He made them fishers of men, you see, and brought them over here in the early 1900s. This is around, the time of the First World's Fair when he arrived on the scene, when Nikola Tesla and other people were, making their inventions and their discoveries. And he met some of them. It's on historical record. You can look that up, 1893. So this non-duality, we call it, or Advaita Vedanta, gets underscored in India and has been for thousands of years. You can't pick up any scripture, even the secondary scriptures of India, without feeling it heavily present in there, you see. So the Upanishads have then a penchant for non-duality, but they also mix in this qualified non-dual atmosphere. That's evident in these slokas at the end of chapter 4, where they're talking first about Brahman and then about Brahma. They're talking about the birthless, deathless Brahman and then about the firstborn. See, birthless, deathless Brahman gave rise to the firstborn. That's Lord Brahma. So you have this distinction between Brahman, the nameless, formless reality, which is never found in a form, and then Lord Brahma, who's the firstborn, the golden child. Sometimes they call him Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg. You see, he gives rise to everything. And as he does, then Vishnu sustains it. There's an energy of sustenance. You don't have to believe in deities, or, I don't see why you don't, because you're a deity. See, you're walking around on two legs. You're God walking around on two legs. So if you don't believe in yourself, fine, don't believe in the gods and goddesses. But the gods and goddesses are just like you. Vivekananda called them big men and big women. They exist inside of you, is the point. Sure, you don't have to believe them if you go looking outside and trying to find a god and goddess somewhere. You're going to be hard put to find an 8-armed person walking around, you see. But that's symbolic of how many powers God's had. All these arms, all these hands, all these fingers, all these eyes, all these ears, all these mouths. You know what I'm referring to, that chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishvarupa Darshanam, where Krishna says, I'll show you, Arjuna, my cosmic form. And he appeared in front of Arjuna. His form took on this. Arjuna what Sri Ramakrishna called love eyes and love ears. See? He said, you can't see me with those senses, Arjuna. I'll have to transform you, as it were. You see, I'll put my hand on you. The laying on of hands in Hinduism is not just for healing, it's for revelation. So if Krishna touched you in the heart or the head or anywhere in the throat, then all of a sudden, you would be transcendent of your usual self. It's called samadhi, and you saw Ramakrishna go into it quite often in his life. But beings are so attached to their senses, and they believe so much that the senses, what they perceive through the senses is real, that they're not going to abandon the senses for anything. Besides, the senses have their objects, and the objects bring pleasure, you see. So why should the worldly person want to leave pleasure? There's only one reason, because pain comes with pleasure. But those people who don't know that cling to pleasure, and they cling to life. And that's that fifth hell we just talked about, fear of death. Clinging to life, fear of death is the same thing. You should be letting everything flow through you and then letting it go and taking it on again. See? Om Pramadina, beautiful slokas out of the Sandeha Kim Karishyani Vrittiman Prapadyante Vilyante Buddhischa Yata Jale. Jale means water. See? So ignorance is unreal, so it can't cause you any real doubt. Therefore, what does a yogi do with a mind and its projections? He lets them rise naturally, then he dissolves them like bubbles into water. Buddhischa Yata Jale. He lets them all dissolve like bubbles into water. Remember yesterday I was telling you in your meditation, you revisited your day, and then you dissolved everything that happened to you back like bubbles into water. Thoughts are bubbles, and they can give you problems if you don't dissolve them. Meditation is dissolving your thoughts. People think, I have to sit here and dissolve my thoughts, so here I go. So I'm going to meditate now. I have to stop my thoughts. And they put effort into that. But really, maybe you should be thinking, they rose and now they're going to fall. See, it's just a natural process. But if I don't make sure that they fall, then they're going to leave behind a residue called karma, and I'm going to have to dance to that tune, you see. I'll be on strings like a puppet, see, hidden, unseen strings. And me and my ancestors and my relatives and my children will go around and round in lifetimes as puppets, you see. But snap those bonds, you see, cut those strings is what they're proposing here, and that's what's done by dissolving everything back into the mind from which it came. The mind projects, and the mind sustains, and the mind dissolves. So that's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, isn't it? That's the work of the Trinity in you. But Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva have much higher aims for projection, sustenance, and withdrawal than you do, you see, than most people do. Their projections are very, very sattvic, very beautiful. That's the world of Ishvara. Yeah. It's a different world than the world of men. It has its original tent has been kept intact. It has kept its integrity. But here, outside, you can't really say down here because there's no up and down here in space. There's nothing up there, and there's down here, it's just earth. But you must say in there or out there, see. So out here, the intelligence has become dumbed down. It's become dimmed by the senses, and the senses dim it further by looking at the objects. And the objects are about as far out as you can go. You can't really go further out than that. It's called insentient or inanimate. See? And the key that most people don't know is all of this came from inside of you. It's not just a sort of a cute New Age saying or something. It's a fact of projection. So the Trinity started projecting on a very high level, and then the collective mind got a hold of some of its intelligence and projected a little more. That's called the heavens. And then, the individual mind gets a hold of some of the light from heaven and projects here. You see, all of these things. You don't have to pray for God for anything. He's already granted your prayer. This is what you wanted. See, why are you praying for anything? Now, if you don't like what you got, then you must dissolve it back into its source. Don't just hang out here and forbear ignominiously, unnecessarily, these sufferings that come from objects, from being attached to objects. Renounce them right now. Renounce the world right now. It's unreal. And be free this moment. Don't live in it anymore. See, I give it up. I dissolve it all back into the mind that projected it. Now, I'll have to keep my mind in that recognition that we just chatted about. Right? You remain in recognition of that fact that all is Brahman. That's called enlightenment. So is enlightenment really so hard to attain? It's really a matter of your own projection and withdrawal. So that's what they're talking about here in these slokas. That is, we started out with 17, which said to us, 18, which said to us, when ignorance is dispelled, there is neither day nor night, nor being nor non-being. There is only that auspicious one, who is imperishable, and who is worthy of being adored by the Creator. You see, there you have it. That imperishable one who is worthy of being adored by the Creator. There's the qualified dualism. There's a nameless, formless Brahman, and then the Creator, Lord Brahma. See, so there's a matrix for all of this. And that's precisely why you can't call Brahman the cause of anything. You'd have to say, oh, Lord Brahma must be the cause of this. The Creator God's the cause of this. But I cannot bring God down into this mess, you see. This wonderful mess or this horrible mess. Either way, you can't bring God into it. It remains pure and perfect, as the chant said. Indivisible. There shines Brahman. Hiran Maye. Hiranyagarbha, very similar words. There it shines, you see, in its own light, self-effulgent like a sun, not shining by any other light like a moon does, but self-effulgent. See? Knowing that to be pure and perfect, and the only reality, absolute reality, ultimate reality, then the seer becomes still and quiet. If the bottle is empty, it doesn't gurgle anymore, Sri Ramakrishna said. See? So empty out that mind of all its contents and sit in the emptiness. When you manage to get your mind free of thoughts, that's emptiness. It's not the highest realization, but it's very peaceful. Why is it peaceful? Because you're still there, you see. Who is it that emptied it out? Who is it that's experiencing the emptiness? You see, you emptied everything out of your mind, but you're still there, you see. In fact, the real you has now been stripped of all its coverings. And it's pure and peaceful and happy and motionless. It doesn't have any desires anymore. It's not trying to attain goals. It sees its nature, and that's enlightenment right there. They've tried to explain it in so many different ways, and Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta and Tibet and these rare and singular countries that have focused on spiritual truths and have left the world alone. The world will go on by itself. People think, oh, I have to operate the world or control nature. It's doing fine on its own, leave it alone. In fact, Swami Vivekananda made a beautiful statement. He said, the only way to prove that you're not matter is to leave matter alone. So you're going to have to detach from all things, because all things are Maya. They're change, and they have a birth and death, and they pass in time. It's that simple, really. Knowing those few non-dual axioms, then you can be pure and perfect, no matter what situation you pass through. And the situations really are tests for you then, aren't they? They're muscle builders. Swami said, come to the world, it's a gymnasium. Flex your muscles here and then leave it. See? Why do you want to stay here? You've seen it all. What you haven't seen is your own true, immaculate, eternal self that shines in its own light, that's full of bliss. You see, we had that in the chart yesterday. The very top of the bhakti path, bliss and ananda. The very top of the wisdom path, transcendence. So those two begin to look like the same thing. Bliss is transcendence. Transcendence is bliss. See, that's where the triangle comes together and the paths merge. And that's back to you. It's back to the source again, your true nature. All of this was just all the time about just realizing your true nature. And these were just methods and steps you took. Path leads to the goal, but the path is not the goal. It has to be realized and trodden. You see. Hopefully you're going to tread it in the most natural and easy way. See. And so the Vedas and Upanishads give you that kind of help, that kind of clue. So there is only the auspicious one who is imperishable and who is worthy of being adored by the Creator. So you worship the Creator worships Brahman, and you get to the Father through the Son. The next sloka we can read 19. No one can grasp that reality above, across, or in the middle. There is none equal to that one whose name is great glory. Mahima would be the Sanskrit for that. Great glory. That's why I put this chart up, and we usually put this chart up to inspect it as an example of all the different channels that are running through you. See? Nerves. We think of them as nerves, but we're only thinking of our physical anatomy when we think of them as nerves. There's a Sanskrit word, and here's where we fall flat in English or any other language that's not so ancient as Sanskrit and whose culture hasn't concentrated on inward things, is that these nerves that are running through us by the thousands are just an external template that symbolize an internal body that has millions and millions of other nerves. That's why these chants here, you see. I culled a few of them out. Let me just run them by you here. Within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness. Akasha is space, with its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, in which all the universes exist. Does it sound like the kingdoms of heaven are within you? You know, thousands of years before Christ said that, the rishis were saying that. See? And they had explored it inside with their consciousness. In the depths of the heart, they say. See, in the recesses of the heart. Not the anatomical heart only, you'll find, or not the emotional heart, which has its problems, but in the Atman, the real heart of humanity. So bathe in that most sacred confluence of holy rivers found within the precious human body where the three spiritual nerve channels meet. I can do another one by memory out of the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. The Durga Devi says, that's the Divine Mother of the Universe says, there are some 350,000 nerves flowing through the subtle body of mankind. 10 of them are prominent, and 3 of them are especially specific. Those 3 they just mentioned here, where the 3 spiritual nerve channels meet. One up the spine, one around the left of the spine, one around the right of the spine. This one's called Sushumna, this one's called Ida, and this one's called Pingala. And you go exploring inside. You know, that's why we joke sometimes, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, you see. Columbus went exploring on the outer nadis, you see. We explore in the outer nadis. And when we go into space, we're not going into inner space, we're going into outer space, right? So if we send rockets out there, we're exploring the outer nadis, the outer channels. But these inner channels, 3 of them, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, carry Kundalini Shakti, carry this divine energy. And this takes you into deep sleep tonight, takes you into dream. It takes you into enlightenment. It takes you to death at the end of your life. This is where souls go. And India has known this for thousands of years. That's why you don't go to India and propose a question to them like, does God exist or not exist? They'll say, well, long ago we knew that God is existence. We put the whole question to death long ago. You can't question the existence of your own existence. What kind of a fool would you be? So, from time out of mind, they've known this immortal Brahman, see, and meditated on it, and taken it everywhere with them on these journeys, which are like dreams, you see, that you're taking. Ramana Maharshi said, this is one dream you're taking right here. This is dream number 2, probably. And your dreaming state tonight is dream number 1, because your dreaming state tonight came before this. See, you don't know that yet, but if you were to dissolve the waking state, you dissolve it into the dreaming state, and you'd find your subtle body there, and you'd find your gross body out here. Then you dissolve those 2 into your causal state, and you're in your deep sleep state, and that's where everything went formless, and you were very happy, you were very peaceful, and to be formless. You see. No more form to worry about. No more waking up and falling asleep. No more stomach aches. No more headaches. No more families. No more karma from families. Constant, endless problems that nobody really cares to solve anymore. They just wallow in problems. One of the teachings of Vedanta is you must become abshobha, emotionless. You must be like a ghoul, or like a child, uncaring. See? Why are you running yourself ragged in angst about unreal things, about dreams? Are you right now brooding on the dreams you had last night? I hope not. They must have been pretty bad, or pretty good. Nightmares and dreams, you see. So dreams pass, and this dream will pass too. That's the point. It's just that this dream is taking longer to pass because everything is slowed down here. Everything is solidified. But what hasn't slowed down here is the mind that solidified it. That's a problem. Everything here seems peaceful if you leave it alone. You prove to yourself you're not matter, then leave matter alone. So if you leave matter alone, you'll find it's fine the way it is. Matter is not the problem. It's the mind that's the problem. No mind, no matter. No matter, never mind, my teacher used to say. If there is no mind, there will be no matter, because matter came from mind. These are just thoughts concretized. You concretize the pillow by thinking pillow. You concretize the house by thinking house and building it. It all started out in the blueprint, the architect's blueprint in your mind. That was a thought. Everything happens by thought. And if that's too simplistic for you, then read these chants. That thought flows through 350,000 nerve channels to get here. And you flow back through those 350,000 nerve channels to get into your formless body again. See? But this flow is happening so fast that you don't see it. That's what I mean. The mind happens so fast that this may be slowed down and densified, you see. But your mind is still running miles a minute, you see. It won't stop. And meditation leading to enlightenment is all about making the mind stop, at least for a while, so you can see what you're doing. First you'll see that God's not doing it. Then you'll see that there's no devil doing it. And finally you'll see that you're doing it, and that God and devil are both in you. See? And then cut to the chase. You're on the brink of enlightenment. And you say, when will I stop doing this to myself? and just rest. Is death the only rest for you, or can you rest in life? Because if death is the only rest, then you're leaving it to Maya to come and go. See, you're not taking the bull by the horns. But if you can sit like this for an hour and stop the processes and check in with your true self, then you'll find everything out here starts to radiate. I mean, are the seers and saints and yogis and avatars and rishis, are they having the problems you're having? If you've lived with one, you know they're not, like I did. I lived with several, and you'll see that they're enlightened. Everything is the same to them. But you're looking at that and saying, "Oh, that's too boring. I don't want everything to be the same. I want to dream. I want to fantasize. I want to imagine. I want to project forms at thousands of miles a minute, and then forget completely that I was the projector." You see. And forget the ultimate projector here, Brahman. I want to forget him too. See? Brahma, I'm sorry, Lord Brahma. Forget that ultimate projector. So I have no relationship anymore with the gods within me, the deities. I don't believe in them. I only believe in what the senses show me. You see? That's how much I've dumbed down my intelligence. How sterile I've left the equation of life. So then how can you complain when life doesn't satisfy you anymore? It's really your own doing. When they're sitting there in peace and bliss, and or trying to get there, or enjoying the path along the way, you're complaining about all the problems of life that you projected, and blaming them on someone else. So it's not going to wash, see. You have to be the dictator of your own destiny. See? And in order to do that, you're going to have to be a participant in your own awakening. You can't leave it to chance. Chance is Maya. See? Chance has been rolling on forever. And those people who left things to chance ended up in Maya. So these slokas, in a very short few words, are giving you the solution every time they're read, every time they're spoken, every time they're thought about or meditated upon. The solution's right there in a word. The next sloka is, "Some, being afraid, approach thee." 20. "His form does not stand within the range of the senses. No one perceives it with the eye. Those who know it through the faculty of intuition are thus seated in their heart, become immortal." So back to the heart of things, you see. And these nerves, here's another example. "That individual soul is as subtle as a hair point, divided and subdivided hundreds of times." How are you going to explain this to people? You have to sit down and think, what's very fine? What's more than a micron in the end of a hair, you see. So if I can see that actually with my eye, so now I'll use that as an example for people to explain to them what the Atman's like. It's more subtle than a hair point divided hundreds of times. In the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and each of those 100 more exist, and each of these branch into 72,000 others. In all of these, Shakti power flows. This dynamic energy of Brahman that I was talking about. Up the centers, down the centers, in the centers, out the centers, inner space, outer space. This flow of dynamic energy. It's not kinetic, it's not electric, it's not the energy from food. It's pure spiritual energy. Getting a hold of that, the yogis, the rishis, and the seers and saints and so forth do marvelous things in the world. First, they use it to break their attachments from things. If you see this energy flowing through you, you want that. You don't want these pale, wan, pallid forms of energy that are making you hungry and thirsty, and then making you satisfied, and then making you hungry and thirsty again. Or you don't want to just measure electric vibrations, you see, and write them down in books by the hundreds and thousands, or look into space and take a bunch of notes, you see, and then send up a rocket and have it come back and with information you can't process, which changes every time you look at it. You want this energy now that is true to itself, that's authentic, you see, that's noble, that's inspiring, you see, that causes you to come to class and listen to words about it. See? Mother's in everything, doing everything. Ramakrishna's whole secret was he let her do everything. He just saw her and backed off. See? Te dhyan yoga nugata pasyan devatma shaktim svagunayar nagudam yaha karanani nikilani tani kalatma yuktanya adidishtat yekaha. On and on they go explaining this. By the yoga of meditation, the ancient seers saw this divine energy flowing through thousands of nerves in everything, inside of everything. Devatma Shakti, the divine energy, you see, of Shakti. That's right here in this Upanishad, this one of the meditation chants we've memorized. See? So these are some of these beautiful quotes. Here's another one. There in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, abides the Atman, stationary but becoming manifold. Meditate upon that self as Om. And Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. How's that for a blessing for the day, you see? Anyway, 5 or 6 of these chants, plus one I pulled out of the Devi Bhagavatam, all on this inner nerve this channel, this system of nerves that are not just throwing in the physical body, but they're flowing in the subtle body within you, and along which these energies flow. I did some sort of pathetic attempt here, you see, to show all these nerves and where they're going. See, the basic structure is there, but I couldn't sit there on a computer and draw 350,000 lines on an 8 by 11. You see. So I left it this way, you see. But we've looked into this. I bring it up here not to examine the 3 worlds and the different chakras. We've done that in other classes. I bring it up here in that context. It is the great. It is the eternal. It is worthy of being worshipped, and from it came all the ancient wisdom. Those are slokas we had yesterday. So these 2 charts I use for slokas 17, 18, 19, and 20 in chapter 4. And then there are 3 more slokas here in this chapter, and we're finished. And they have to do with Shiva. Now, he's talked about Lord Brahma in this qualified non-dual vein. Now he goes on to say, some, being afraid, approach thee, thinking that thou art the unborn. O Rudra, deign to protect me with that benevolent face of thine. Rudra is a terrible form of Shiva. Terrible here means not, necessarily angry and destructive, but destructive of your impurities. You see, chase the bats out of the belfry. You see, the devils out of the basement. You ask Shiva into your life, Rudra into your life, and then you're asking for purification, basically. You want these things gone and gone for good, so you call on Shiva. So here the rishis call on Shiva. Some approach thee being afraid, and they know you to be the unborn one. See, O Rudra, protect me with thy benevolent face. So and that's that beneficent face that Shiva has, but wrathful doings, you see, when it comes to ignorance. and impediments can level the playing field if you ask them into your heart. Again, you're asking the energy of Shiva to come to you, not necessarily some fellow with 4 arms, you see, but the energy of Shiva to destroy these impediments once and for all. And particularly beneficial if Shiva happens to be your Ishtam. See? Now, in Ramakrishna Loka, that is, we're all devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, and Swami Vivekananda, then you pretty much have, in this day and age, all these gods and goddesses centered in Sri Ramakrishna, because he meditated upon them all, realized them all. And so he's called Sarva Deva Devi Swarupaya. He's the essence of all gods and goddesses now. So he's made it in this age very easy to gather this bouquet of flowers in you. You see, these different gods and goddesses. He often said that himself. I've gathered, the flowers of the different religions and deities together into one bouquet, and then I offered it to the Divine Mother Kali, and she was pleased, you see. And then she freed me, you see. This Devatma Shakti that's running through us all. He got aware of that, and then she took him over. She co-opted him, you see, and then used him for her purposes. So that's Sri Ramakrishna's secret, is total egolessness and 100% commitment and surrender to Divine Mother, his Ishtam. In the meantime, he had all these different practices going on with these different deities, like Shiva. And therefore, all these gods and goddesses came to be known to be in him. And he was the exemplar of their presence in this day and age. These are ancient goddesses and gods, right? So how do we understand them today? Are they no longer applicable to us? Well, then a Ramakrishna has to come along and coalesce them all into one grand realization and realize them in samadhis of different kinds, and then make them more accessible to you. See? They don't have to be ancient. They can be timeless. And so therefore, as we say, there's no such thing as a foreign religion. All religion is indigenous to your soul. So now you can find all the deities for all the religions gathered there in Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Om Shtapakaya Chatarmasya Sarva Dharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha, as Vivekananda wrote about him. He's steady in the Dharma, he's the essence of all Dharmas, and he's the most recent and current coalescence of the best of all avatars. Avatara Varishtaya. So in that way, he contains Shiva within him. We were chanting the Ramakrishna Chalisa last night. Remember that? We were all singing it together, those who came to puja for his birthday last night. And so we were singing Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karunamaya Jaya Kripa Nidana 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 Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karunamaya Jaya Kripa Nidana. So, Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavana. Victory to you, the Lord, Bhagavan. Karunamaya, full of compassion. Jaya, victorious. Kripa Nidana, full of grace. Just one beautiful mantra like that. And then 40 verses called Chalisa on his life, how he was born to Kshudiram and Chandramani and his parents, and how they had visions before he was born. Kshudiram in Gaya, where Buddha taught, you see, had a vision of Vishnu there, and Vishnu said, I'm going to be born as your son. And his father said, I'm not worthy. You see, basically the 3-word mantra of the West. I'm not worthy. And then at the same time, Chudiram was having that vision, Chandramani was back at home, you see, the birthplace of Ramakrishna, called Jairambati, Kamarpukur, and she was having a vision of Shiva in the temple. She went there to pray, and all of a sudden the light comes out of the image of Shiva that she was worshipping and enters into her body. You see. And later finds herself to be with child. So, same time he's having his vision of Vishnu saying, I'm going to be born to you, she's having her vision of Shiva. And then when Ramakrishna is born, as the Chalisa was saying, he crawls as a baby into the hearth, and the mother looks away for a while and comes back and she's not there, and he's crawled over into the hearth and he's smeared with ashes. This naked baby is smeared with ashes. That's an emblem for Shiva. He covers himself in ashes. This is the contemporary manger scene, you see. If you're a Hindu, you see. If you had a preoccupation with neon lights like the Westerners do in India, then you'd go around and you'd see little scenes of little babies crawling, covered with ash, and parents standing there. And that would be on every lawn. See, although the lawn isn't real popular in India, you might have noticed. Not much space there. Anyway, with that said, as a sort of preamble to Lord Shiva, we find that this sloka is propitiating Lord Shiva. And it goes on, the next sloka, 22, injure us not in respect of children, grandchildren, and life, nor in respect of cows and horses. Do not destroy our heroes in thy anger, O Rudra. We invoke thee always with offerings, and that ends chapter 4. So the whole chapter has been, as I read it to you yesterday, right? I read you the first 17 slokas, or 16 slokas. Then we studied 17, 18, 19 in accord with those two charts I just showed you, the death of ignorance and the nadis and lokas. And then, now here we read 3 chapters at the end about Lord Shiva. And we can look, therefore, at this chart for a minute to see what Shiva is, since he has come up. Remember, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva being the Trinity is this very important matrix that you pass through. If you come out of formlessness into form, then you'll see the Trinity. And then you'll pass through the Trinity to earth. This is inward to out, not upward to down. This is inward to out, they're trying to explain to us. This is what they've seen as they pass through the kingdoms of heaven within you. Or my Father's mansion has many chambers. Christ went on to say, my Father's mansion has many chambers, some of them of rest and some of them of sojourn. So there's the sojourn. These different nerve currents, your soul, that is your mind, is taking. Remember, in Indian philosophy, we make that distinction. You have a soul that's immovable, and you have a soul that moves. See, that's in keeping with Brahman and Shakti, isn't it? But you don't want it to be in keeping with Maya. That's false motion. See, Shakti is real motion. Maya is false motion. See, that's the illusion of motion when you're in Maya. So you think you're coming, you think you're going, you think you're growing, you think this and that, but really it's all dream. A man running a race in a dream, Gaudapada says, goes nowhere. He may get a trophy at the end of his race in a dream, but he wakes up in his bed and there's no trophy there, you see. It was all a figment of his dream. So the same is out here, you see. You can't take it with you kind of idea. You may have this for a while. You've projected this. You've gotten yourself into it. In fact, beautiful that Portland is studying the Taittiriya Upanishad. And in the Taittiriya Upanishad, later, that Portland devotees haven't seen there's this sloka. The Atman desired, may I become many. Let me procreate myself. The Atman brooded over itself. Having brooded, it projected all this, whatever there is here, from inside to out. Then Atman entered into it. Having entered into it, it became both being and beyond. It became the defined and the undefined, the founded and the foundationless, the conscious and the unconscious, the real and the unreal. Whatever else there is, yea, it became the entire reality. For that reason, sages declare that all this is real. From that standpoint of their understanding, all this is real. From the standpoint that a person doesn't understand the Atman, all of this is unreal. See? It's Maya. So take your pick. Do you want to see all this as God, or do you want to experience all as Maya in continual rounds of pleasure and pain? In accordance with the sloka we just read, in the Taittiriya Upanishad again, in the beginning there was indeed non-being. From that verily being sprang. That of itself assumed a self. So Brahman of itself assumed an Atman. It assumed a self, and that assumed another self, called ego. It's all assumption, in other words. Therefore it is called the self-made or well-made. It truly is the flavor which is the essence of existence. Surely by grasping the flavor, this one, the individual soul, becomes blessed. If you get the flavor of Brahman in everything, then you are blessed. This is true life. This is eternal life. Everything else is palate imitation. See? It's like eating cotton candy for nutrition. It's tasteless. It doesn't end you up in any profound place or realization. Who indeed would breathe? Who would remain alive if this bliss were not in the ether? Brahman is this bliss. Remember the chart? Right? This bliss that is at the apex of everything. We were saying yesterday, Ananda doesn't have an opposite. You put a in front of a word in Sanskrit, and it's its opposite. So if you say nitya, it means eternal. You put a in front of it, anitya, it means non-eternal. It's opposite. But you can't put an a in front of Ananda. See? Ananda. It doesn't have an opposite. Joy does, you see, and happiness does. But bliss doesn't. The bliss with a capital B is Ananda, you see. So that's what it's saying here. If you grasp this flavor, this individual one, you become blessed. For who indeed would breathe, who would remain alive, if this bliss were not present in you, and if it were not present in the ethers? All 5 of them, by the way. Not just physical ether. It's here too. You can get bliss here too. But you get more and more bliss as you go inward. That's coming up. Indeed, it is that and that alone that causes blessedness. Now, the individual soul becomes fearless only when it obtains a firm and peaceful ground in that invisible, selfless, unutterable, supportless reality. Whenever it assumes the smallest interval in that state of identity, then it has fear. Where does fear come from then? By falling away from Brahman even the slightest bit. By forgetting your Atman even in the least, you see. Tiniest modicum of forgetfulness causes this fear. It allows fear to enter. Vivekananda was fearless. Always in realization of his Atman. Always. Not a second passed, you see. That is why even a wise man has fear when he is not reflective. Someone said to me yesterday, I spent a couple months looking for a job, and all that time I was really worried. I said, why did you do that? That was your chance to study the Dharma. You didn't have a job. You had time, and you spent it brooding? What's wrong with you? You could have had 2 months of bliss and peace Instead, you're worrying about a stupid job. Mother didn't want you to have a job at that time. She took away your job so you would have this time to practice the Dharma. If you keep your mind on the Dharma all the time, nothing else gets in. Nothing will bother you. You'll be perfectly reflective. That is why even a wise man has fear when he is not reflective. See? You must be a full-time contemplative of yourself. You must be a great admirer of yourself, of your true self. I hope you all know I'm not talking about the ego self, not the anatman. I'm talking about the Atman here. There is this memorial verse about it. I'm sorry I've switched you to a class on the Taittiriya Upanishad now from the Svetashvatara Up, but you're going to want to hear this about bliss. And if the Portlanders are watching, just pretend like you're not. Just plug your ears for a minute. See, these slokas are coming for you. This is an assessment of bliss according to the Upanishads. Let it be supposed that there is a youth, a noble youth, in the prime of age, most swift and alert, perfectly whole and resolute, most vigorous and of good learning, and that to him belongs the entire earth laden with all riches. Then we have in him one measure of human joy. 100 such units of human joy make up a single unit of joy, which is the human genai, which they possess. A sage full of revelation and free from all cravings also possesses the same joy. 100 of such units of joy of the sage, which the sage possesses, makes the joy of the heavenly genai. 100 such units of joy, which is heavenly genai possess, make the joy of the manes. Those are the demigods, who inhabit the long-enduring world. 100 units of joy which the manes inhabit in the long-enduring world possess, make the joy of those gods who are so by birth in the ajana heaven. So the gods. Hear what they're saying here. This perfect man enjoys, a unit of pure joy, bliss. But then you go to the sage, or the realm of the celestials, you might say, and they possess 100 of those units of joy that the young man had. And then you go to the realm of the demigods, and they possess 100 of those units that the celestial had. Then you go to the next realm, inward, kingdoms of heaven within you, and you find that the gods enjoy 100 of units of what the demigod possesses. It doesn't stop there. 100 such units of joy which the gods possess make the joy of those who have become gods by the force of their deeds. 100 such units of joy which those gods who have become pure by their deeds, for it also happens that a man attains to Godhead by his own deeds, make the joy of the highest gods. 100 such units of joy of the highest gods make the joy of Indra, the Lord of gods. So Indra has huge amounts of bliss. See? This is what we were starting to say, about how everything increases exponentially as you go inside. The kingdoms of heaven, the finer the bodies become, the finer the worlds become, the more bliss there is, till you get to Lord Brahma. Of course, I'm jumping the game here. So you've gotten to Indra, who's the god of gods, but he's presided over by the Trinity. 100 such units of Indra's joys make up the joy of Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the teacher of the gods. He's actually human. So this is what they said earlier. It so happens that some humans become enlightened and realized by their deeds. So this level we were talking about of austerity and self-effort and attainment was realized by Brihaspati when he was a soul, and now it's so qualified him as to be a teacher of the gods. So he has hundreds and hundreds of units of bliss. 100 of his units of bliss belongs to Lord Brahma, the creator God. So at the level of the Trinity, then you've got one measure of bliss of the pure man, the young man, then 100 of his go to the celestials, to a celestial, and then 100 units of that joy go to the demigod. 100 units of that joy more go to the god. 100 more units go to Indra, and 100 more of Indra's units go to Lord Brahma. And that's their definition of bliss in the Upanishads, you see. Come on in, and you may duck the camera, unless you want to have a cameo appearance, a camera appearance. All right, now we know how much bliss Brahma has, right? But it doesn't end there. A sage who is full of enlightenment and free from all cravings possesses all these various measures of joy severally and progressively. So an enlightened soul has more bliss than Brahma, Lord Brahma has. And this bliss which is in the human being is also in the yonder sun, and they are the same. That one who comprehends fully, as stated above, after departing from this world, transcends the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya koshas. With regard to that, there is also this memorial stanza. And here we'd better leave the Taittiriya Upanishad, or this will turn into a class on the Taittiriya Upanishad instead of the Svetashvatara Upanishad. So those are some slokas taken out of one of the other main Upanishads. There are 108 of those, but 11 of them have been commented on by Shankara, so they're major Upanishads. So there you have something to the effect of the definition of bliss. So finishing up chapter 4 then, we have those slokas on Lord Shiva. So let's look at his chart here really quick. This chart, some of the teachings on Shiva in the Shiva Agamas, that is the scriptures of Lord Shiva, which are read and studied by the Shaivites. Remember, they're one of those lineages, one of those sects, you might call them. It's not the best word in English. Sometimes you grasp around for words that are better used in Sanskrit, but they study these Shiva Agamas and these scriptures. And it says here in one of the teachings, Shiva has 2 Shaktis, 4 padas, and 5 functions. So the quote opening up here, the relationship between Shiva and Shakti goes beyond all types of characterizations. It is a mystery realizable in the light of self-expression as consciousness. So one's going to have to study their own consciousness, that is, get some distance from the world and from material things and inanimate objects and senses and their attachment to them, and take a look at their consciousness that is doing the looking. You see, you have to examine your own consciousness. So if you could take sesame seed oil out of a sesame seed, you see, they say it's very difficult to do. You have to gather a bunch of seeds and invent a press and press it to get just a few drops. And then you'll know what it is. So in that way, that's how hard it is to examine your own consciousness. It's not given to most people because they're operating through the senses. Their consciousness is going outward through the senses, and the senses are defective. Otherwise, they would have shown us God, the reality, but they're not. They're showing us Maya, the world of name and form, time and space and change, attended by suffering and misery. Pleasure is a kind of suffering, too. So, you would have to study your own consciousness to know, in the light of self-expression, what Manoranjan Basu, this great tantric adept who's still alive, I think, is, so we saw him in India some decades ago, but you have to know that to understand what he's saying there. This mystery realizable by that being who can examine their own consciousness, can step back in meditation and examine their own consciousness. And first, of course, you'd be identifying consciousness with the mind, which is a mistake ultimately, because it exists beyond the mind. And, of course, beyond the intellect, too. That's Atman, we call it. So let's look at these, first these 4 padas. Pada would mean kind of like a foot, like how you get around. The 4 feet of Brahma, they say, the 4 feet of Shiva. So these are the way Shiva gets around without being seen. You see why wisdom is so invisible. First of all, his first foot is Jnanapada. He makes himself known, or makes himself intuited, or felt anyway, by maintaining philosophical systems. Shaivism is the system attached most to him, those who worship him as their Ishtam, Lord Shiva. But he also maintains all other systems, Vedanta, Tantra, and Yoga, and Samkhya. So all these systems, Shiva wants to make sure they're kept in the world. And that's one of his functions, is to keep those alive. You wouldn't be sitting here if he didn't, you see. You wouldn't be hearing this wisdom, which is, for all intents and purposes now, esoteric. We want to make it commonplace, but it's esoteric. Not many people know about it. And if they hear it, they're not interested, or they don't believe it. See? They just bypass it, because their senses are focused outward on objects. They're seeking the unreal, not the real. Now, another of his functions is Yoga Pada. So Jnana Pada is maintaining philosophical systems so that we can study them. Yoga Pada is encouraging spiritual disciplines. So we had talks about that yesterday in private meetings with a few of you, about this importance of contemplating, doing austerity, doing self-effort, and attaining something. That's a part of the wisdom path. You make progress that way along the wisdom path. So sometimes we've explained that as you're on the cycle of the world. You see, the grist mill. You're being ground. You see. So you want off that cycle, so you find out about morality. So you get on that circle, you get away from the world, and you start circling on the world of fundamental religion. You see, you're going around seeking morals and ethics. Thou shalt not kill, do not steal, so forth. Then that becomes inadequate for realization. So you get off that circle, and there's another circle going the other way around that circle called Dharma, teachings. Now you find, oh, there's more than just being a moral person. There's actually teachings that I can hear that will make me, that will introduce me to the level of spirituality. So now I go, I find a teacher, I enter a path, I get a mantra, I get initiated, I get a mantra, and then I listen to the Dharma as much as I can take in, like water for a thirsty man, or air for a suffocating man. I want to hear that Dharma all the time. See? And that's, then pretty soon you fill yourself with the Dharma, as we just said. Why did you spend 2 months worrying that you didn't have a job? That was your chance to study the Dharma, and you missed it. Because you're worrying. Oh, I don't have anything to do? Great, let me pick this up and start reading. Let me go and hear it expressed by an authentic teacher. And the job will come. Otherwise, I'm worrying, the job is remaining far away. Keep yourself in the Dharma all the time, even when you have a job or when you don't have a job. Those things pass and change. They're called Maya, changing circumstances, but this is eternal. So shouldn't I fasten myself on the eternal and let the world come and go as it will? Why should I worry? Why should I be unhappy when the eternal Dharma is within me? See, but I have to remind myself. I have to perk what's inside of me. Like I'm a piñata, you see. And I have to go poke myself, you see. Or poke the teacher. So you're on that cycle of Dharma, and you think, is that it? No, then there comes another cycle where you practice the Dharma. What a novel idea. I should actually practice? Hearing's not enough? No, I must hear it, Shruti, and then I must contemplate it in my mind, and then I must realize it. And that's called sadhana. You get on the cycle of sadhana where you practice what you've heard. You see, you don't practice what you preach yet. You're not qualified to be a preacher. So you practice what you've heard, and you turn it into pure experience, and that ends all cycles and gives you enlightenment. See? Krishna says in the Gita, you must know that there's an end to knowledge in truth. There's an end to knowledge. So you can't just become a professional student of any kind of knowledge, lower or higher. You're going to have to translate that into direct spiritual experience. Nididhyasana, we call it. Or Ganesha, the elephant-headed god, calls it Anubhava. See? Anubhava tattvam. Direct spiritual experience of the tattvas, of the principles, that are eternal principles, that are worthy of being studied. So this is Yogapada. Shiva encourages spiritual disciplines in you. He wants you to hear it, right? So he keeps it there in the form of hearing. Words, pages, books, teachers, temples. But you must turn it into practice. These are the two ways in which Shiva is introducing himself to you, even now, here, in this very life. The third pada is qualification and duties. So you have to qualify yourself for a higher level of realization. If there is an end to knowledge in truth, then I must find truth. I cannot be satisfied with anything less than the absolute non-dual truth of the matter. Only that will satisfy me. Other things keep me spinning on these wheels. I mean, then you can also become a professional practitioner, you see. Practice and never attain, you see. That's, again, what's here, isn't it? You get some padyate after you get self-effort, and the self-effort, you get that after you do some austerity. And you contemplate before that. And before that you hear the scriptures. So it's all one trajectory heading towards transcendence, which is that bliss I was just reading to you about in the Taittiriya Upanishad. You don't think there's rewards to the spiritual path? You cannot store up your treasures on earth. You must store them up in heaven, Christ said. See? So this is what you're storing up. It's nothing tactile or sensual or material that you're storing up. Those are not real things. Those came out of your mind as projections. You must dissolve them back into the mind to get the real essence of where they came from, you see. And this is sort of what's examining your consciousness is like. You know the story of Shiva, speaking of Shiva. They called on him when they were in trouble. Who was in trouble? The gods and the asuras. The gods and the asuras always war with each other, the gods and the demigods, because each want what the other has. So you think war is only here on earth? No, there's also war in the heavens. So they are warring, you see. And then Brihaspati, the sage we just mentioned, they approach him and they ask him, we've heard of this Atman that's beyond all, which is the greatest treasure of all. See, they're into treasures. So they're thinking Atman is some treasure that's, they can actually, like a jewel or something they can have. They don't know its real nature yet, like full of hundreds and hundreds of measures of bliss. So Brihaspati says, yes, there is such a treasure, and you might be able to attain it if you churn the ocean of nectar. So the gods and the asuras decided to quit warring and go into cahoots about this thing. So they saw the ocean of nectar there, and then they say, we need a churn. So they saw Mount Mandara nearby, so they turned Mount Mandara over. They picked up the mountain, turned it over. And then Vasuki was nearby, the great snake, so they wrapped him around Mount Mandara. And the gods got on one side of the snake, the head side, and the demons got on the tail side, the asuras. They always get the wrong end of the stick, you see. And then they started pulling Vasuki, and it made Mount Mandara act like a churn, and they dropped that into the ocean of nectar. And then as they churned the ocean of nectar, all these beautiful things started coming out of the ocean of nectar. Lakshmi's diadem, and the winged horse, and the cow of plenty, Kamadhuk, who gives milk all the time, but you don't have to feed it. All these beautiful things started coming out of the ocean of nectar. And they started grabbing them for themselves, you see. But what they didn't know about possessing things and grabbing things is that there's a karma to pay, you see. So as they're churning the ocean of nectar, unbeknownst to them, off to the side, this poison is forming out of the ocean of nectar, which is their greed, which is their ignorance. So this poison starts flowing out and begins to eat through and erode the foundation of their world. Remember, worlds are inward. There are planets out in space, but what can we do, you see? We can't even reach them, mostly. But these inner worlds, you see, where the deities live and where the celestials live and where your ancestors have gone, inside, within, they say, the kingdoms of heaven within, or my Father's mansion has many chambers, those started eroding the foundation for them, and they were going to destroy these lokas, this acid, this poison. So they called Shiva. They said, Shiva, what can we do about this insidious poison that's eating away? And so he took a great cup, you see, and he caught it, and he drank it. And that's his sacrifice. He's called Nilkanta, blue-throated one. And if the poison had have gone down into his system, it would have destroyed him, but Divine Mother was there. And we just say here, Shiva and Shakti goes beyond all types of characterizations. See? It's a great mystery. So wherever Shiva is, Shakti is. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, wherever the male pigeon is, you'll see the female somewhere, see, nearby. They might not be together, but you look and you'll find, you see. So wherever that male principle is, that female principle is bound to be. So she stepped up and put her hand on his throat so the poison wouldn't go to his stomach, and it stayed in his throat, and it turns his throat blue. And so to this day he's called Nilkanta, the blue-throated one. And so he quaffed all the poison of these actions of the gods and the goddesses, gods and the demigods rather, and saved them that way. So this is one story about Shiva as we look through this in accord with this pada, charya. Charya is like a teacher, you see. So you'll have to qualify yourself to become able to transmit these teachings. You can't do it too early because it's a precision machine, right? You have to know how to operate a precision machine, these scriptures. So you do austerity, you meditate, you contemplate, you realize, you take the teachings and so forth, and get some attainment under your belt, and then you qualify yourself, and then your duty is to spread it. See, this is all. You think that maybe one of these would be the end-all and be-all of existence, and for some it is. They get the knowledge and they merge, and that's it. They'll never come back to earth again, with all its suffering, all its misery, with its fair faces and false hearts, with its empty, substanceless attainments and possessions and riches. You're not storing up your treasures here, so you're just creating karma by them. So they would just go away, but others would qualify themselves, and their duty would be then to come and give you those teachings. They want to wake you up, like they woke up, like their teachers woke them up. And that's called a transmission. We talked about it yesterday. From guru to disciple, that disciple qualifies himself, becomes a teacher, passes it on to other students, like Christ did to the 12 apostles. I'll make you fishers of men, he said. So each of them had to qualify themselves to understand his message. It's actually questionable whether they did really understand Christ. It's very hard to understand a soul like that. Kriyapada is the last, and then we'll take our break. Divine and dharmic activities. Once you qualify yourself, then what's left for you? You see, you could leave the body right now and it wouldn't matter. In fact, better for you if you did. Just go to the kingdoms of heaven within, or merge yourself in Brahman, into that hundreds and thousands of measures of bliss, you see, that you have waiting for you. This bliss is then your very nature. But instead you decide to enter into dharmic activities or divine activities. You decide to stay around as a living, liberated soul. What's that word in Vedanta? Living, liberated soul. Huh? In Buddhism, it would be a bodhisattva. That would be the jiva who has the Atman in him, but he hasn't necessarily recognized it yet. But close. That would be Jivan Mukti. You had the first word right. Jivan Mukti means a living, liberated soul. He's a jiva still, but he's liberated in life, like my teacher was, Swami Shishananda. He had seen Holy Mother face to face, and she had blessed him. And he used to say, I've heard her voice, I've seen her face, now I long for her grace with all my heart. So just a few times to seeing Holy Mother, he had seen God in this very life of his. So he became a living, liberated soul, and he could transmit these teachings to you. And then, if you were so inclined, you would turn around and transmit them to others. And we'll continue with this Vedantic transmission after our break. So let's take 15 minutes here. In the meantime, the live streaming audience can see this chart while we break for some refreshment and some exercise to wake yourself up for the next hour. We have another hour left of this class in San Francisco, but we have reached the ending of chapter 4, so we'll put a exclamation point on it. So here we'll take our break. Om Namaste. Thank you. We are back for our second half of the second class of this weekend's classes in San Francisco on the Svetashvatara Upanishad. We're practically done with chapter 4, which is a good hallmark for us here in San Francisco, because then when I come back in May, you will know that you should be looking ahead to chapter 5, so you're preparing yourself, and that's what we just talked about, this qualification and duties, this kind of prep that you do, which is one of the functions of Lord Shiva. We're thinking of Lord Shiva here as a divine energy flowing through us, sort of like Shakti. We don't have to necessarily think of him as a four-armed figure, or with many heads. Those are, of course, symbolic of many powers of God, many hands, many legs, sort of like that chapter in the Gita we just talked about, where Krishna reveals himself with thousands of mouths and thousands of eyes and thousands of arms, and the whole conflagration of the battle flowing into his many mouths, these rivers of blood with elephants in it and chariots and dead soldiers, and a very ferocious vision that Krishna grants to Arjuna of the cosmic form of the Lord. And Shiva has his cosmic form too. In terms of Krishna, you would correlate that with Lord Vishnu, that is the second of the Trinity. Shiva would correlate with the third of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So this is one of the distinctions that is being clarified in the 4th chapter of the Svetashvatara Upanishad, that there is an ultimate reality, and then there is its expression, its divine expression. So Brahman with an N and Brahma without the N are those two. Brahman is the nameless, formless, divine, absolute reality, or pure consciousness, or pure awareness. And the Lord Brahma would be that energy, that firstborn, they call him, the firstborn. And he gives birth to other great rishis and manus, the 10 great minds, and the 7 sapta rishis that has come out of Lord Brahma. So they preside over the 7 worlds and so forth. So there's this whole cosmology, ancient, timeless, and long-lived, by the way. That's its most amazing characteristic, other than the ancient wisdom came out of it, which the Upanishad has just told us, is that it's so long-lived. These ideations are divine concepts that were in the minds of the rishis, got put down in such a way, we were talking about that at the break, that it was an oral tradition. You would chant one of these great sayings or thoughts that realized by any given family of rishis to your child, and they would memorize it. And so this is how you learned the greatest teachings of life. And then later on, maybe there was less time, maybe even less intelligence as the ages rolled by. Then you had this need to write them down so they wouldn't get lost. Vedavyasa, the father of Vedanta, with the help of Ganesha breaking off one of his tusks and dipping it in ink and writing, is the way we explain that in the Itihasa, the scriptural history or mythology of India, a story about Ganesha and Vedavyasa getting together, and Vedavyasa, there's an end of an age, and Vedavyasa has all the scriptures by memory. He's an amazing mind, father of Vedanta. So he wants to, it's time to write them all down, so they have plenty of paper but no pen, you see. So that's why whenever you see an image of Ganesha, he has just one tusk. And you wouldn't know that otherwise. That's because he sacrificed one as a pen to dip in ink to write down all of Vasishta's wisdom so that it wouldn't get lost. Well, that was also the work of Shiva when he's trying to maintain philosophical systems. That was the Shiva portion of Vedavyas, who was there on purpose to write down these Upanishads, or we would not have them. It would just not be there. And there's 108 of them, and there must have been many hundreds or thousands of them, because there are that many families that were involved in spiritual life in that age. They called it the Golden Age, Satya Yuga and so forth. I mean, it's a different kind of Golden Age than, say, the Greeks, because we know how quickly that passed. But that's one of the amazing things about this long-lived, long-lasting wisdom of which I started out the class today saying, calling it the Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means eternal, and Dharma means path or religion. So this has been there from time out of mind. Ramakrishna mentions it in the Gospel. The Sanatana Dharma of the Hindus has lasted forever, and it will last forever. So, and basically that's because it goes back to those two pillars I was talking about. No birth, no death in the soul, and no transformation in the soul. If you're talking about the soul with a capital S, pure consciousness or timeless, deathless awareness, you're talking about something that never changed and never will change. And everything around it is always changing. So nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam, they say in Upanishads. It's the eternal among non-eternal things. It's the intelligence of the most intelligent ones. So in that way, we see and revere these great souls and these great beings like Lord Shiva, who keep these things present for us to contemplate, meditate, and get free if we happen to fall into bondage. By the way, you should never fall into bondage because it's not actual. It's always assumed. You're never bound, you're always free. Let's call it ever free, never bound. And that was Vivekananda's way of saying it to us when he came. I named one of my musical CDs that, Ever Free, Never Bound. So with the music on it, first one starts out with joy, joyous, bliss. And next one is about the Divine Mother and so forth. So you have these eternal axioms that are finding a way through certain channels, right? Different nadis, different nerve passages that are within you, that lead you into deep sleep, into dream tonight, that lead your soul after death into other worlds, or that lead you straight to Brahman so you can merge, if that be your preference. You should have that option. I can come back to form free, or I can just never come back to form again. Like Lord Buddha said, I'm gone and gone forever. So those are the two options. You shouldn't have any other option than that open to you. You should close that nadi, that descending nerve channel that says, I have to come back to earth out of desire. I have to come back to earth out of karma, pay karma. I have to come down to earth to satisfy my ancestors. Close those off. See? Snap the chains of bondage and remain always free. So that if you do come back, then you come back as a Jiva Mukti. Because you are Jivatman, you are the Jiva that has the Atman in it, but you're just not aware of that yet. Like we said yesterday, the musk deer smells that beautiful scent on the wind, but it doesn't know where it's coming from. It means it doesn't know it's coming from its own navel. So this consciousness you see everywhere is within you. It's nowhere else to be found. It's within you. And that's not just a New Age saying when you go to the Vedanta. It's an eternal fact and a verity, an axiom, a maxim. It's non-negotiable. It's irreversible. It's unimpeachable. See, it's the king of all principles, and that thou art too. See, you don't just talk about it and then not and forget to say, and that's also me. See, I am that. I and my Father are one, see? And nobody could ever take that away from you. So if you have those non-dual axioms, you're in a safe refuge. You're in the peaceful home. That's Shiva. Shiva's called the home of peace. Because he's destroyed all your erroneous notions, all your karmas with your ancestors and family, and has fulfilled all your desires, and now you're free. So you have those two options. You can remain free and dissolve like bubbles in water, every thought form you ever had, or you can come back again, qualified and ready to free others. Fishers of men, bodhisattvas. So those are the two options open to you. And if you can't quite reach those, then I would say there's one other thing you could do. Pray for dharmic parents. Pray for dharmic parents, someone who will teach you this early on so you won't have to struggle to learn it later against the current of karma, suffering, bad upbringing, emotionalism. You see, all these things you should have never had to suffer. It's not noble for the human being to suffer that. Human being is divine. The jiva is Shiva. My teacher used to say that all the time about Shiva. Or if you want to sing it, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Shiva. Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Shiva. Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Shiva. Hare. Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Shiva. Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Sada Shiva, Samba Shiva. And so forth. It means basically Shiva and Shakti are always one. Samba Shiva. They're always one and the same. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, like fire and its heat. Can you separate them? Water and its wetness. Can you separate them? Snow and its whiteness. Can you separate them? A joke and its humor. Can you separate them? Yeah, you can. It's just a bad joke. I knew you were going to say that. So, you get my point. This Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. Like I used the analogy, as Sri Ramakrishna said, wherever the female pigeon is, you'll see the male somewhere, and vice versa. You just have to look for it. So male and female principle are there. Sri Ramakrishna said, whenever I look anywhere in the world, I see the combination of the principles of Shiva and Shakti. He said, I saw God in the mating of a dog and a bitch once. I'm using bitch in the old style sense of the word. So in the sexual intercourse between two dogs, he saw God. See? So that divine energy is everywhere. You see. So the last pada then of Shiva here, one of these feet that he gets around on, one of these principles, is Kriya Pada. Kriya, when you hear that word, somebody wrote me actually just last night from Canada and said, Sanskrit's a very unusual language. It seems to me like there are many words, many meanings for one word, or many words for one meaning. And so Kriya is one of those words in Sanskrit. It's like it can mean a breath. It can mean immediate, spontaneous action. So that's more what it means here in the case of this Kriya Pada. Divine and dharmic activities, though those are spontaneous. It's not like altruism where I think I'll go out and do good to someone, you see. It's that by the very presence, the highest benefit is happening. Vivekananda used to say that. And Ramakrishna used to say that about Vivekananda, Narendra. He used to say that he's this, wherever he goes, ignorance will go away like darkness in the sun. You see. Swamiji just has to appear there and everything's fine. So you felt that way about being in his presence. You walk in the room, gee, where'd my worries go? You see, just immediate like that. That's Kriya. You're lifted up immediately despite yourself, if you want to put it that way. I mean, there again, that's why we sing. If we want to use the medium of music for some of these communications. I mean, because, these scriptures were sung. These scriptures, they were intoned and sung. That's why some of you are practicing the memorization of them, because they were initially sung and intoned. But oftentimes, when we talk about Vivekananda and his shining light, we sing this. Samadhista Shiva. Shiva. They're equating him with Shiva. Svaloke nirbaram Jnananam karandanad Bhavagyo bishane Pradagdhanam prabodhitastvam hyagata vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi narendra shashave narendra yovane narendra kridane narendra shikshane narendra palane narendra yarpane vivekanandate prabhate pranjalihi. So you look at Narendra as this great light who comes amongst us. The manifestation of Shiva, the first verse is calling him. And many, many other beautiful verses follow that. Actually, that's now a YouTube video. You can see that sung live by Jama Music. If you look at YouTube videos in SRV, the whole 14 or 15 minutes of it, whatever it is, with all the verses and many, many beautiful pictures of Vivekananda in color that have been colorized from the ancient pictures we took of him. Because when he showed up, photography was still very young science. But we have managed to get a lot of pictures of him while he was alive, which is not the case with Ramakrishna, because we only have like 3 or 4 if you count the one on the funeral pyre, where the devotees are standing around him just before they set the pyre ablaze. But these 3 main ones of Sri Ramakrishna were there when photography was just barely an infant science. So this is reminding us of Kriyapada, the divine and dharmic activities of a living Shiva like Vivekananda, who would come to the world and immediately start helping people without even knowing he's helping them, without even trying to help them. See, just by his very bones he will teach. Who said that? Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, his guru. The render will teach just by his very bones being here, as it were. See, his body being present will teach you. That's his purpose. So this is Shiva's purpose, you see, these 4 padas. Now let's look at his 2 Shaktis, Bindu Shakti and Maya Shakti. His 2 Parigraha Shaktis. That is very beneficial. The quote there, 2 powers of Shiva cause and oversee all the worlds and forms in time and space and constitute the materials of the universe. Now, in order to understand these 2 Shaktis that are flowing in Shiva, we have to look at these 5 functions. Then you'll know more about the oneness of Shiva and Shakti. Now, these 5 essential functions here are Anugraha, Tirodhana, Samhara, Sthiti, and Shristi. Now we know Sthiti and Shristi are, we would probably better words in English than creation and preservation would be projection and sustenance. So something gets projected, because you can't really say creation because you can't create something out of nothing. You're creating something out of something that already existed. So say pillows already existed in your mind as the thought pillow. So you're drawing them out of the thought pillow and turning them into solid pillows. And when they die, they go back to their thought pillowness. You see. So they don't really die. They get destroyed. Nothing does. Remember the first axiom? There's no transformation really happening. It just appears that there is. So everything that appears out here, as the Taittiriya Upanishad just demonstrated for us, it becomes being, it becomes non-being. It becomes manifestation, it becomes non-manifestation. It is everything there is, Atman, Brahman. So then all of this is projection. That's Srishti, you see. And that's the function of Lord Brahma too, to project everything at the beginning. Oh, Babaji, I thought you said there were no beginnings. At the beginning of a cycle of time that souls are in belief of. See. Souls that don't believe in time, they don't get born, unless they do so of their own will. Krishna says that in the Gita. Those who are in knowledge of me and are my devotees, they are never born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of destruction. So they know they're not the bodies. So if they come with a body-mind mechanism, they know they're not that. They're already detached from it. And so they're not really here, are they? Like the person who's completely convinced that they are the body. Then to them, death and birth are real. But death and birth are not real to the soul who knows that they're the Atman. It's really that simple. It's a matter of consciousness, not a matter of physics or energy or even thought, really, although thought helps. So I'm starting out with this fourth one first. The fifth one, Shrishti, is projection. And then Sthiti is sustenance. Shrishti, Sthiti, Laya. Laya would be destruction. So those are the three functions of the Trinity. One projects, one sustains, one dissolves. So you should know all three of them. I mean, they're in you, after all. That's why you also project, sustain, and dissolve things. Most people aren't very good at dissolving things, though. You project it, and then you sustain it, then you get attached to it, and you want it forever. But you cannot have it, you see. God slaps your hand in every case, doesn't he? Eventually. You can't take it with you, as they say. And you can't really know or possess an object because it's not real. How can you possess an unreal thing? You're trying to possess your own thought projection, by the way, and it's already yours. So you're in double jeopardy. You project the thing, then you get attached to it, but it's already yours inside of you, you see. This is the problem with what they call the six passions. Anger, lust, greed, envy, jealousy, pride. Why should you have any of the six passions within you whatsoever when everything has come out of you and you own it at all times? Why this problem with ownership when it belongs to you anyway? It can never be taken away from you. You're so attached to the outer form of it that you're putting yourself through lust and anger and greed and envy and jealousy about things. Then, go visit Ramakrishna or Ramana Maharshi sitting there with nothing. No children, no family, no house, no car, no money. They don't even know where their next meal's coming from. And they're perfectly happy. Not just happy, they're blissful. They're free of all these considerations. And when they get hungry, someone will bring them a little food. Like that story I told you about Vivekananda yesterday. He's wandering India. He hasn't eaten for days. He's really in dire straits now because, there's no food around. So he lays down by the side of a railroad track near a little village. And in that village that night, this man has a dream. And God appears to him as his Ishtam. Maybe it was Shiva, who knows. And says, "I'm hungry. Come feed me." The man wakes up. That was a strange dream. He goes back to sleep, of course. He has the same dream again, only more powerful this time. "I'm hungry. Come feed me." So the man gets up, and because of his faith in God, he stands up out of his bed and goes to his little larder, takes some food, puts it in a little knapsack, and leaves the house. He doesn't know why he's doing this. It's just on a dream. And he comes and stumbles over practically Swami Vivekananda lying there almost dying of hunger. And he gives him the food. So these beings get hungry, food will come to them. I mean, isn't food everywhere at all times? Wherever there's good people, there's food. Food is the foundation for spiritual life, if you look at the tantric systems. That's why you pray over it and bless it and make sure it's pure. Because you ingest impure food, then your blood becomes impure. If your blood becomes impure, your mind becomes impure. So it's just common sense, not even a spiritual teaching, really. And so, what's this world having you do? Eating on the run, fast food, various problems with food. So don't violate the laws of food and you'll be fine. So explaining Shrishti and Sthiti first, we're going from bottom up. Samhara is dissolution. That's where you would maybe use the word Laya. Shrishti, Sthiti, Laya is creation, preservation, and destruction, but I tend to replace those words with projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. is better. So samhara is withdrawal of everything. As I was saying, easy. Withdraw it all, like dissolve it in like bubbles in water at the end of every day. So at satsang Friday night, someone asked me a little question, about meditation. I said, if you were a worldly person and you knew nothing about spirituality, but you got interested a little bit, then probably the first meditation you'd want to do is sit at the end of the day and dissolve everything that happened to you back into your mind. By not doing this, then insults become on the increase, you see. And praise flatters your ego and inflates it. Whatever happened to you that day was unreal. So you sit and you level the playing field of your mind. You just want to start the next day off even, clean slate, right? You don't want to have anything lingering, good or bad. And this is the first and most inferior use of meditation. It's helpful, but it's not the best use of meditation. So if you are a little interested in meditation, you do that every day. You don't even have to put on your cheddar and grab your beads and walk down to the shrine room. You can just go to your room before you sleep, spend 15 minutes thinking of everything that happened to you that day, and dissolve it. Laya. Oh Shiva, please dissolve this for me. I don't want to think about any of it. It's all gone, like sweet meat down a throat when you eat it. It's gone. Why should I hold on to it? Because holding on to it is giving me these problems, these karmas. See? And then I'll find out I'm holding on to it the next day, and it's exacerbating and turning into a worse thing, and so my bad habits start coming back on me, and it's all just unacceptable, you see, to the freedom-loving soul. It's unacceptable. You renounce it outright. So that would be the first use for meditation. If you were more interested in meditation, then you would meditate not only at night after everything's done, but about an hour in the morning at around 5 or so, before you go to work early. Then that meditation would show you what just happened to you in dreaming. See? Because if you wake up and don't meditate, then all your dreams disappear. You don't have any signposts for your life. If the gods were trying to communicate to you through your dreams, or your ancestors were sending you a message through your dreams, it's like one telegraph to the other. It's a broken line. Message isn't getting through, you see. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. One village is typing out a telegraph message to the next village a couple miles away, and they're not receiving on this end. Why? Because the monkeys got onto the trees and started messing with the lines and caused a break in them. So a road crew has to go out there, put it back together, and then the message can be sent. So the monkeys, you know what those are, right? In your mind? Distractions, or the disability to meditate in the morning to find out what your dreams are telling you. Not only that, maybe you might have an experience of your deep sleep, that you went formless during the night, and you might remember that and see how blissful it is. You're interested in those 100 measures of bliss, or 100 times 100 measures of bliss that Indra has, then try looking into your deep sleep, because that's where you were blissful and peaceful. That's a doorway into Brahman, deep sleep. In fact, the 4 padas of Shiva, there's another teaching, the 4 padas of Brahman, how Brahman gets around the universe, and one of those has to do with deep sleep. And actually, all 4 of them are waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya. Those are the 4 feet of Brahman. That's how the Lord gets into you and walks around in you, via waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya. Turiya means samadhi. But if you have those 4 states of your consciousness and you're only aware of the waking state, see what I mean? You're not aware of the other 3 feet of Brahman moving in you. So where's that taking you? Just around and around in cycles in the material world. So open up your dream state, open up your deep sleep state. This would be the use, the utility of meditating in the morning. See what they're trying to tell me here. You might be getting a message straight from God, you see, like the Blues Brothers. I'm on a mission from God. He wants me to go on a mission. And you're missing it from the little monkeys of non-meditation messing with your lines, with your nadis, you see, causing little knots in them. Grunties are called. So nothing can get through. Some monkeys don't just break them, they tie them in knots. And then energy's trying to get through and it's not getting anywhere. You see, it's blocked. Like most of the roads today. Blocked by construction crews who don't seem to be fixing anything. Just go out in the streets of San Francisco here, year after year. See the same mess. Well, let's dissolve it all then, you see. Samhara, or Laya, let's dissolve it all. Let's ask Shiva to dissolve everything at the end of each day. And then meditate on our states of our consciousness, and then meet God face to face. When Mahatma Gandhi said, if you see Sri Ramakrishna, you see God face to face. Sri Aurobindo said a similar thing about him. So these great souls have all looked at this amazing soul who came, who in just 150 years has created 5 million devotees without lifting a finger. Last night we did the puja for Ramakrishna, you see, and I said, well, we're only 8 or 10 people here, but remember you have 5 million people worshiping with you right now. Whenever you're sitting to worship, even if you worship alone, 5 million people are behind you. That's a lot of people, a lot of soul power. And these aren't just ordinary people. It's not like 5 million people belonging to the, tennis club. So, see around. These belong to a different kind of. This is Club Vid, you see what we're talking about. Vid means knowledge, knowledge of God. So you've got a lot of force behind you, a lot of support. Why are you so attached to the form? You don't have to see all 5 million every day. And 8 be enough for you? I mean, that only happens rarely when I come. And you're all off on your own, so you must be individual Shivas walking around and Shaktis walking around. God, man is God, mankind is God walking around on 2 legs. That's how Vivekananda put it. But he has to realize that fact. Can't leave it unrealized or it's not true. So he has to prove it to himself. And if you prove it to yourself, you prove it to others. Like Vivekananda did. Then they'll write songs about you, sing them. Passed away in 19 whatever, 02, 03, 04 or something.
02.
Yeah. So it hasn't been long since he's been here. It's over 100 years, so, and they're writing songs about him already, and singing him, and worshipping him. So, he is a very good example of Shiva, how he destroyed the ignorance. He used to say, darkness cannot exist around a sun, so meditate on the sun. Didn't we just read that in the Taittiriya Upanishad? That same bliss that is in the realized soul, who has hundreds and hundreds of measures of bliss, is the same bliss that's there in the sun. That's a good one to meditate on. Now the other 2 essential functions of Shiva, there are many functions to Shiva, but the essential ones are Tirodhana and Anugraha. In Tantra, which this is really, Shiva is really a tantric deity. In fact, when you talk about deities, you're mostly talking about Tantra, and when you talk about the non-dual Brahman, you're talking Vedanta. So it's kind of a general distinction you can make. But these are very interesting. Tirodhana is self-limitation. This is a solution for those of you who don't accept or are having problem with the doctrine of original sin. If you can't accept it. Like Vivekananda used to say, you'd come here and you'd say, liable of liable, it's the worst sin to call another a sinner. You are divine. And that's how Vedanta starts off. Mankind's soul is divine by nature. I mean, it never changed. It wasn't like it fell from grace. It dreamed itself away from grace, maybe. but it can dream itself back and be free of all dreams. You can fall, but still be the same as you always are, right? Doesn't your mind change all the time, but your mind is still your mind? See? Still your mind. Well, it's even more true about the soul, Atman, is that it's unchangeable. It's present at all times. It's in everything. It permeates everything, Sri Ramakrishna said, like sugar, like sweetness in sugarcane juice. Permeates. All pervasive is the word. So back to this idea of original sin, the Shaivites, the Tantrasists, the worshippers of Shiva, the Tantrasists would rather look at all problems as self-limitation. You see. In other words, you brought them here on purpose. They're not black marks on your soul. You're taking them on purpose. And you take them on purpose because you veil your vision of God. And when you veil your vision of God and you grow, and those fall off, those self-limitations you took on, you get more and more vision of Shiva, see, as you grow. So self-limitation is like putting veil over your own face. Sri Ramakrishna used to do that. He'd lift up a towel in front of the devotees. He'd say, now you see me, now you don't. You see, that's self-limitation. No, the veil, the towel isn't real. I myself am putting it up. I myself am tearing it away. Doesn't it go very well with projection, sustenance, and withdrawal? So you're playing with those things. Your own limitations are fruits that are unripe. They're not black marks in your soul. So if you have a tree full of apples and the sun behind it, see, then you sit there for a while, you can't see the sun. Then the apples start ripening and falling, see. And then all of a sudden, it's a bare tree with no apples and you can see the sun behind it, see. That's what your sins, your so-called sins are like in Tantra. They're not real. Evil's not real. If it were real, Christ would have said, resist evil. See? He didn't, did he? He said, resist not evil. You don't resist it because you give it energy when you resist it. If you just don't think about evil, it goes away, and there's just goodness. You know what Shiva's name means? Goodness. That's one definition for Shiva. The other is auspiciousness. So he's just that one who, by removing limitations, shows you your own self. And how does he do it? By grace. Anugraha. See, it's self-expression then. Everything is about you as the divine being. You limit yourself and you free yourself. And that's play. It's not problems. It's not problems and solutions. If you get caught in problems and solutions, then you're not playing, you see. You're not playing the game right. You should be the soul that always knows itself, puts up its own limitation and drops it. This is why we keep talking about dissolution and, of the mind stream and dissolving all thoughts at the end of the day back into, like bubbles into water, because it's up to you to do that. To play this game here in relativity with these kinds of restrictions on you, with all the karmas and family and desires and things that are going on in the collective mind of humanity, to play that game right, you're going to have to put forth some effort. And how do I put forth the effort? In the mode of self-expression, in the mode that I took on the limitation and I can give it up. This is where Tantra meets Advaita Vedanta. Because Advaita Vedanta just declares outright that the world's unreal and you are the only reality. Atman is the only reality. So when Atman plays, we read that at the end of the Taittiriya Upanishad, those who experience 100 times 100 times 100 measures of bliss, what happens to them? Do you remember? The very last thing I read in that sloka. They transcend the 5 koshas. They transcend the body, they transcend energy, they transcend mind, they transcend intellect, and they transcend the ego, which was the rascal in the whole equation, the sense of separate self. I and my Father are two. See, problem. So, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha get transcended, and true bliss is theirs again. So, and all the time, and you'll probably realize this, you're a very special soul if you realize this early. It's like, they say Maya is that being who leads you on with one hand and covers your eyes with the other. So you're going towards something, but you don't know what it is. So everyone has hope, or belief, or maybe faith. But those who have more than belief, their faith is very strong, they say, lead me on, but I'm going to take this hand off, you see, so I can see where I'm going. That's a very rare soul. If that doesn't happen to you, then by the time you get to the end, you will see it then. You will see that you were playing all the time with lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, fear, dualities, karma, the illusion of bondage, the illusion of death. And there were millions of souls playing that game, but you were at least fortunate enough to realize in the end that you're always free. Holy Mother said that. Those who meditate on Ramakrishna, he will come to them at the end of their life. But there are some superior souls who realize Ramakrishna during their life. They have vision of him during their life. That's why you want to keep those monkeys away. Keep those connections, you see. Don't let them rust or break. Wake up, go and meditate in the morning because Ramakrishna may be trying to reach you. See? But you're busy on your cell phone. See? There's a subtle cell phone inside, you see. Answer that phone once in a while. See if he's texted you. See, you are Brahman. You see, or when you die, I will come get you, and you'll take you to Ramakrishna Loka. Oh boy! See? So you'll get a little premonition of what's in store for you. You see, and that's tearing off the veil early. You see, some souls are so strong as to be able to do that. So these three are fairly well taught in the tradition. Creation, preservation, destruction, or like I say, I like to call them projection, sustenance, and withdrawal, or dissolution. But these two are very particular or peculiar to Tantra, rather than Vedanta. They're talking about these self-limitations in you being something that you took on yourself and that you can get rid of. You took them on before this body was born. And then when you get in to the body, the next body, you have planned for yourself when they're going to disappear. You ever had that feeling that you've set everything up in your life already, and then you set it up as a surprise to yourself, and then when it happens to you, you're happy, you see. And maybe you call it the grace of God or whatever, but actually you set that up for yourself. You set up a meeting with your husband, your wife. You set up, certain things that were going to happen to you in your work. You set up certain, if you of the mind, you've set up certain fruits of spiritual life that are going to ripen at that time. But you don't really know that till they come and go, you see. I've often told you, or sometimes tell you, the story of a friend of mine who had a dream. A seer appeared to him in a dream with a beard and everything, with full makeup, and told him everything that was going to happen, told him 5 great things that were going to happen in his life. And then when he woke up, this friend of mine, he had forgotten them all. He remembered the dream, but he'd forgotten the 5 things. And then he would call me like every year or two and say, remember that dream I had? Yeah, one of those things just happened to me and I remembered it. And I think I was about on the 3rd one when I lost contact with him and haven't heard from him since. The 3rd thing that the sage told him in the dream had actually happened, but he couldn't remember them, you see. This is this kind of forgetfulness or surprise that you yourself have planted for yourself in life. And, there is the possibility, probably the probability, that you may plant something for yourself and forget to uncover it. See? That is, you put so many problems in the way, and so many blockages, and so many misconnections, that you had some beautiful things planned for yourself, and they're not happening, or they happened and you missed them. So this is why you keep vigil, spiritual vigil all the time. It's very important, and you can't let the world encroach on it. Job, school. And this is why Einstein said, hurry up and get your schooling over and then get a real education. Your real education is out there in life, and I would say particularly in spiritual life. Those are where you hid all those beautiful things that are in you. And you want to come upon them and surprise yourself. Now in the case of a seer, he doesn't play like that. You have to know that about the avatars and the reality souls. They don't want to play anymore. They don't want to surprise. They just want to be the Atman, and that's plain and simple. The bliss of God is theirs. They want to enjoy it at all times, uninterrupted, unalloyed. And they found it, they kept it, and they stayed that way. Playing is over for them. Like Gaudapada says in the Karika, in the Mandukya Upanishad, he says, many people think of God as this and that, his grace, his expression, his play, the lila. The non-dualists don't think about that. We don't prefer. Why would God play when God has everything already? Basically, why would he want to play with it? So they don't believe in lila. Lila is a very beautiful principle in Tantra, and many people like that expression when they hear it. Oh, that's a good explanation for why all this is happening, you see. As a philosophical explanation, it's very good. But as an end result, you're not going to find the seers playing. In fact, they think the suffering in the world, although it's unreal, is real to those who are going through it. So that's why they will come back and get crucified or get poisoned or get cancer of the throat. They'll forbear all this because they know they're not the body, so that they can help you wake up from all dreams and give up this penchant of playing. You know what happens to school children after recess? Do they continue playing? They go learn. It's back to the classroom for you, till you learn your final lesson and graduate. So this is, anyways, some of what's in my mind about these 5 beautiful essential functions of Shiva, especially these last 2, self-limitation and self-expression. These 2 are good to meditate on in the sense of what I've just related to you as tantric principles, because they're different than original sin and the grace of God. They're different in tone and tenor. They'll give you something more to add to the principles of original sin and the grace of God. You'll see them maybe in a different way then. Like Sri Ramakrishna, famous saying, the grace of God is a wind that's always blowing, but you have to raise your sail. See, isn't it? The grace of God, the wind of the grace of God is always blowing, but you have to raise your sail to catch it. So that's that effort you have to make to keep the playing field clear, keep the nadis, there's no word in English for it, the subtle nerves open, see, the channels flowing, the Shakti alive and flowing through you. That's your duty, see, and you have to qualify yourself for it. So this is how these work together with these, and how these 2 Shaktis are helping you with that. When Shiva, who is rather immobile himself, wants to do something, he'll have his 2 Shaktis come at you, see, and help you with it. Maya Shakti will help you out of delusion. Bindu Shakti will help you become one-pointed. Bindu means this, see, third eye. So you must get out of Maya and see your true nature. Did we read the last quote to finish this chart? Shiva has 5 functions to perform through his Shaktis. He is Satya Sankalpa and Aptakama. Those are nice words. In other words, his resolve are all true and his desires are eternally accomplished. Anything he intends will happen. and his desires are obliterated forever. He has none. Krishna says that in the Gita. I have nothing more to attain in the three worlds, Arjuna. I have no desires for anything. I'm only here for loka sangraha. Loka means all the worlds to which all these avenues flow inside. And sangraha means grace. I'm only here for the highest good of the worlds. That's the basic credo of an avatar. Loka sangraha. He makes the world evolve so that individual souls can be released through the removal of their impurities. And those impurities are these self-limitations. He's going to reveal himself to you by degrees in your life. So you must have that faith. God is always trying to reveal itself, himself, herself, to you. What I mean by itself is the non-dual Brahman. What I mean by himself is Shiva, and what I mean by herself is Shakti. Those three things are always trying to reveal themselves to you. One of them is non-dual, the other two are qualified non-dual. See? He has to come down and take a form in order to tell you this. That's his play, as it were. But he's serious about that play, because otherwise you suffer. So Krishna says in the Gita, I'm here not for myself, I don't have anything to gain. I'm here for the good of the worlds. Pure and simple. And that was the Buddha, that was Jesus, and that was Ramakrishna. In Ramakrishna being the most recent Kali avatar, we call him the most recent avatar, you find that he merged non-dual realization with sport. He was a very unique soul. Like I said, 5 million followers are finding that out so far, and it's growing every day. As I say these teachings to the live streaming audience, there are people who are saying, I want to find Ramakrishna. I know because in the last month 4 have written me from around the country, and they're going to meet me up in Portland next week. So little local sanghas we have, but you don't know what's happening in the extended honeycomb, in the extended family of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, how people are hearing this new expression of the avatar from the Kali Yuga and saying, I want to be there. One person came from Canada, he's actually moved there. Another person's coming from Texas, wants to move there, to Portland. One's coming is a Muslim who's coming. A young lady who's studying physics, physical science, on the East Coast is coming to the retreat, you see. So this is happening slowly, surely, and this is how 5 million becomes 15 million and so forth until Ramakrishna is a wave that washes over the entire world. Has that full incarnation ever come before? Not according to Vivekananda. Everyone in the past, including Jesus and Buddha, were partial incarnations. This is the full incarnation. That's according to Swamiji. I just read it today in his own words. In fact, somebody sent me a question about it. What does he mean by that? You see? So, yes, Mother Kali. You see, the manifestation or expression of Mother Kali is here, who beautifully blends all of these teachings, and not only sportive lila, but non-dual realization, nirvikalpa samadhi, we call it. Now we just have some minutes. Let's make sure in the remaining minutes that we put a final exclamation point on this 4th chapter. So we're reading about Shiva in the final 3 slokas. I'll read them again. 21. Some, being afraid, approach thee, O Rudra, that's the terrible Shiva, deign to protect me with thy benevolent face. So he knows if Shiva's face shows up, the demons take rout. That's why I told the story about his blue throat, you see. Any negativities that come flowing out of the cosmic process, he's there to drink them, you see, and save you from them. Notice the correlation. Have you gotten it? Yes? Blue-throated Shiva. What did Sri Ramakrishna pass away from? Cancer of the throat. You see. So this is brought forward to current times. We know a little about it from the principle of vicarious atonement in Christianity, but what we know is very small compared to what India has known for thousands of years before Christ. So, deign to protect me, see, with thy benevolent throat of thine. Face of thine. See. 22. Injure us not in respect of children, grandchildren, and life, nor in respect of cows and horses. Back then, that was your wealth. The more cows and horses you had, the more wealthy you were. It wasn't money, you see, or those were the money of the times. In the Chandogya Upanishad, Yajnavalkya is there. It's a great rishi, and he's asked to give some teachings to a king. So he goes to the king. The kings really respect the rishis in India. They want the rishis to come into their palace and teach them, because they know the palace is unreal and the wealth is unreal, and they're just biding time. So they want the holy men to come in and teach them. So the king invites Yajnavalkya, asks him a bunch of questions. You'll read this in the Upanishad. And every time Yajnavalkya answers the question, the king likes it, and every time he bestows 100 cows on him. So Yajnavalkya walked in, 10 cows or something, walks out with like 1,000. So you'll find it right there in the slokas. Thank you for elucidating on that question with your beautiful answer. I bestow upon you 100 cows. Then the next time, I bestow upon you another 100 cows. So this was their wealth. So injure us not in respect to cows and horses. See, this is how we make our living, and this is how we give to others. The cow is a symbol of giving in India. You probably know that. That's why it's sacred. It gives, gives, and gives, and gives everything, even in the materialistic West, right down to its flesh. And yet it asks for nothing. It grazes freely off the field. It fertilizes for us. There's just endless things which the cow does. And people laugh at Gandhi because he loved cows. Well, laugh it off while you're getting cancer from eating its meat. And getting karma from injuring it. You see, laugh it off. So the cow is a symbol for giving. Unrequited, it's not going to ask you anything back for what it gives. It just gives naturally. Last sloka then, and we can call it a class. Do not destroy our heroes in thy anger, O Rudra. We invoke thee always with offerings. So, with that final sloka, 22, chapter 4, we have finished the 4th chapter of Svetashvatara. Good place to stop. Remember in your notes then, or in your memory, that we'll start with chapter 5 next time in May, when I come back for 2 more classes here in San Francisco. So let's invoke that very Rudra with our final prayer and Sanskrit sloka. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe Gatung Yagyaya Gatung Ye Nupataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manusebhyaha Urdhvam Jagatu Pesajam Sangno Astu Dvipade Sang Chatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a grand offering into the great self of all. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hare Om.